Hey, it's Clay. Welcome to another video. 4 years ago, in 2018, I set out a goal that I wished to become a scratch golfer. And as of 2 days ago, looking at my GHIN app, I'm at a plus 0.1. So I achieved my goal. I wanted to share that with you guys, and I wanted to do a long form video, kind of a detailed reflection on what goals and steps I made to achieve that. If you're interested and curious to see how a guy like me became a scratch golfer, why don't you stay tuned. Let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so first I wanted to give you some context because I realize not everybody starts from the same point. If you're a brand new golfer at the age of 30 and you're like a 30 handicap, that's a different challenge than if you're a 5 handicap and you've been playing golf all your life. So for some context, I have been a lifelong golfer. There's pictures of me swinging a golf club as like a 2 or 3 year old. I've always loved the game of golf. I played it a lot as a kid. In high school, I did play on the golf team. I also played 2 years in college at a Division III school. I never made it high enough on the depth chart to play in a meet. And after 2 years, I decided that the amount of time I was putting into it wasn't really worth the investment. And so I focused on my schooling instead. After college, I went and got a graduate degree, and then we had my first kid. We moved back, I started my career, and there was about a maybe 3 or 4 year stretch where I basically didn't hardly play any golf, maybe a couple of rounds a year, 2 or 3, but nothing with any kind of regularity. Then about 4 years ago, and just for reference, I also have I'm 34 years old right now. I have a wife. I've got 3 children, ages 7, 5, and 5. And you know, I've got a full-time job, so I've got a lot of probably restrictions that many of you might be familiar with. After my twins were born, and they got to about 1.5, is when I decided I wanted to get back into the game. I started playing a little bit more, and that's when I made the goal to become scratch. So operating within those constraints and you know, limits on my time is been a reality for me. Now, I don't really know what I was at my peak, maybe in late high school and early in college. If I had to guess, I would say maybe was about a 5 or 6 handicap. I would say I was shooting about 80, maybe upper 70s with some regularity. Maybe 78 to 82 was kind of a range of scores that I would shoot at that time. When I picked up the game again 4 years ago, I would say I was similar, maybe a 6 or 7 is where I started. And certainly really hadn't been playing much in the last 4 years, so I was quite rusty, but I did have some foundation. So the first thing I did is I decided that given my time constraints, you know, I did not have as much time to play golf as I did when I was a kid. I needed to make a plan, and I needed to approach this a little bit more with like a system or some kind of structure to my goal if I was going to get there at all. So let's talk about the steps that I took to achieve the goal. And there's quite a few different ones. I'm going to go into some detail here, but honestly, each one of these steps could probably be a video in and of itself on its own. So if you want me to follow up on that later, I could. Okay, so the first thing I did is I started taking lessons. It's a pretty simple and obvious thing. I met with a local pro, and I actually explained to him what my goal was, and we talked about some of the steps that we could do to get there. I've also done lessons pretty regularly. I'd say a couple of times a season I do a lesson, and usually maybe 1 or 2 in the winter months. I live in the Midwest, so golf course closes in about late October, early November maybe, and opens up again in about late March or early April. So I've got some dead months there in the winter, and I try to do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 lessons a year. Some of them I do in person with my local pro. I've also done some online lessons. I'll just tell you, I purchased lessons from Amani Scheinblum, and those have been really good. I also did 1 or 2 with Dan Carahar, and I would recommend both of them. I think it is kind of helpful to get a couple different perspectives and see where there's commonalities and where there's differences. Everybody maybe has a little bit of a different philosophy, but I also do think it's good to have someone that you trust as an authority and that you can kind of follow with their system or with their line of thinking, and to kind of get continuous feedback from that same person is really helpful. And my local pro was really the primary person that I went to for that. Now, I did develop a pretty good interest in golf swing theory and technique, and I started watching a lot of videos, but ultimately you don't really have to do that. I tend to be kind of an analytical person, so I enjoy that side. But if you have a pro you trust, you can rely on them to be the foundation of knowledge and information, and then you can basically just go to them for help. They give you the information that you need to make the changes you need to get better, and then just implement those changes based on their knowledge. Now, let's actually talk about improving your technique or your skills or making swing changes, whatever you want to call it. One of the things that I would say in my reflection is that the golf swing is a continuous and never-ending journey towards improvement. This idea that you're going to do a swing change and it's kind of a one and done deal, and then before you're broken and after you're fixed, is not really how it works. The next thing that I found is that making swing changes is something that takes time and takes dedication. It's something that you should probably be thinking of in terms of months, if not years, and less in terms of like individual range sessions. Like, I'm going to go to the range and I'm going to do this swing change, and then by the time I'm done, I'm going to be good. It doesn't really work that way. What you need to do is give yourself time and repetition to make that swing change permanent and ingrained so that you can go out on the course and do it without thinking. That's the goal. And for me, that usually takes maybe 1 or 2 months of continuous work in order to get a swing change to that unconscious point of mastery. And so maybe one of the things that I perceive in the golf community is just an improper perception about the amount of time and effort that it takes to get a swing change to actually implement. And I think a lot of people maybe go and hit a couple of buckets of balls over the course of a couple weeks, and then they don't see the change and they get a little frustrated. And it's really just because you're not giving yourself a realistic opportunity to actually implement the change. My next thought on that is it's really important to increase the frequency with which you practice, but lower the amount of time. What I mean by that is it's much better to do 10 or 15 minutes every day of very focused and intentional practice, as opposed to 1 2-hour range session once per week or once every other week. Increasing the frequency with which you practice is really beneficial. I've even found that about 15 minutes is actually really the sweet spot for doing a technique change. Because if you go longer than that, if you try to do it for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, I find my brain gets tired and I get kind of distracted, and it's hard to really keep doing it. So if I can just give it 10 or 15 minutes of very focused and intentional practice, and I'm really trying hard to do that one specific movement and do it every day for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, that's where I found the most success actually getting those changes to stick and then to ingrain and to take with me out on the golf course. So, step number 2, this was probably one of the most critical things that I did in my progression. Step number 2 was I built a hitting bay, and you can see it in the back here. I also have a link to another YouTube video I did, but basically I set up a little driving range hitting net in my backyard. And the reason I did that was a couple. Number one, it needed to be easy to access and convenient for me. So going to the driving range is only open for so many hours in the day, and you can't always get balls, or you got to drive out there, and that kills it. So for me, to have it in my backyard means it's always available to me. So there were seasons where I was getting up in the morning and I would do it before work for 20 minutes. Or there are times where I come home during my lunch break. I live very close by to my work, and so I can come home for lunch, eat lunch with my family, and for half an hour, and then go hit balls for 15 minutes, and then go back, and it's a 45-minute lunch break. Or sometimes I've done it at night after I put my kids to bed. The sun goes down, it's dark, the driving range is closed. Well, I can bring a little spotlight and hit balls in the dark in my driving range net. So for me, having the convenience to do it at any time in my own, confines of my own home and property was really, really critical, because that enabled me to do it 15 or 20 minutes a day. If I had to drive out to the golf course, I really don't think that I would have been able to spend the time that was required to actually make work of this. Now, the next reason why I think the net was so critical was because it actually removed any ball feedback. One of the things you might be thinking is, well, how can you know that you're making any kind of improvement or that you're doing it right if you don't have any feedback? When you just hit the ball into the net, nothing really happens. But actually, I think the net is really good for implementing swing change, because the focus is not on what happens to the golf ball. The focus is on how you're moving your body and how you're moving the golf club. And so it really was helpful to have the net, because I didn't really care. I never could see or was very concerned with what the golf ball is doing. I was only focused on changing the way that my body moves and doing better technique movements. And so all of my focus went into the movements, and that's what I was focused on. That leads me to point number 3. The way I did feedback my progress was through the use of video. I probably have hundreds, if not thousands, of little 3-second video clips that I took with my cell phone on my Google Photos timeline over the last 4 years. And the video feedback, I actually built a little, I used a 2x4 and some wood, and it put a little a little holding platform that could fit my cell phone. And so it's at a consistent height and a consistent location. I would take a behind the line view and a face on view. And the video feedback lets me really see, feel is not real in the golf swing. So, I get this feedback from my pro, this is what you need to do. Well, then I could look on the video to see if I'm actually doing what the pro told me to do. And the video never lies. The video always shows you what you're doing. It always reveals to you the reality of what's going on. And so basically the process that I would use was, so I had it in my mind from my pro what I needed to work on, whether it's a wrist change or an elbow change or a pivot change or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it was, but I had that simple, straightforward swing change goal. I would go to the range, my little hitting net, and kind of go through this process. And I'll actually show you a little bit right now what that process looks like. Okay, so here we are in my little hitting bay. Imagine I came out here, I maybe will spend 2 minutes just kind of loosening up or warming up. And then, like I said, I have a thought in my mind. So maybe the thought for me right now is I'm gonna try to feel my lower body. My swing flaw is early extension. So I tend to do this where my right knee and my hip comes forward in the downswing. I do a lot of this movement. So I'm trying to feel like I'm pushing my hip body back in a way like that. So that we're gonna use that as an example. Again, for you, maybe it's something else. It doesn't really matter. It could apply to any swing technique. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some very short little movements where, you can see if you watch my lower body, I'm really just being intentional to feel that I'm moving my lower body in a better way. And then, okay, I've done a couple practice swings. Now I'm gonna hit a little chip shot almost. I bet that ball would have gone 40 yards with a 7-iron. But I'm just trying to really focus on feeling that move. Okay, a couple practice swings to get the feel, and then maybe a little bit slightly longer. I hit that one horribly, and I kind of was off balance, but it's fine. All I'm trying to do is get a feel for that move. Maybe I'll do it again here. So then at this point, what I probably do is do that for a little bit. I'll come back to the camera, turn the cell phone on, take a video where I might do 2 or 3 swings and see if I'm doing it correctly. Then I'll come back, turn the video off, review the video. I've got an app that I use that can slow motion it, that I can examine frame by frame, see how I'm doing, and I take that feedback kind of in a circular pattern. So right, maybe what I observed is, well, I'm doing okay, but I'm not doing it quite enough, or it's causing some other problem or whatever it is. So then I come back and I work on these little feels and just these little drills to try to implement that. And it's just kind of the continuous process of very exaggerated practice swings, slow speed, not a full backswing, until you start to develop some comfort. And you go take a video, you see if you're confirming that what you're doing, the correct move is right. Then you go back and you slowly increase the speed, you increase the length of the swing, and you just kind of keep doing that process. One of the things that I would observe when you're doing swing changes, a lot of people will just try and hit a ball on the range with full swing and speed, but just kind of try to feel something. And in my experience, you have to break it down to its lowest level with slow speed, slow backswing, and confirm with video that you're actually doing the move correctly. And then if you keep doing that with time, you're going to get more comfortable and that move will start to ingrain. So that's the process you have to go through. Do that for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, come back the next day for maybe 4 days a week, and before you know it, you've done that for a month, and you're going to start seeing some progress. I guarantee it. Now, not all of your practice needs to be focused on technique, and probably shouldn't. You still need to develop skills in other areas. I've spent time. I got a launch monitor this year, so I've spent some time this year working on wedge carry distance, making like a clock formula. So I've worked on my driver optimization, so getting good launch numbers with my driver. There's lots of different things that I can do in my net with video and now with the launch monitor to work on my game. I also have a putting green nearby, so sometimes on my way home from work I might stop at the putting green for 15 minutes and do some putting drills. or chipping. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do, but again, the main idea here is to find ways, be creative, to increase your frequency that you're practicing for shorter chunks more often. And for me, that was the best way to really start improving. Now, the next step that I would say is all of this focus on technique and golf swing, the primary outcome is that you want to develop the skill of having a more repeatable golf swing. So for me, all I ever want to do, and we're going to start getting away from the technique and into actually playing golf. So I found that for me, what works best is to commit to having one shot type, which for me is all I ever want to do is hit a draw. Meaning if I'm hitting a driver or an iron, it doesn't matter. I'm going to aim a little bit to the right, and I require that the golf ball will land and end up somewhere to the left of my aim line. Simple as that. And I need to be able to do that repeatably. And for me, that's really the end goal of these technique changes, was to increase the ability that I hit the ball solid and increase the way that I can hit the ball reliably. So, you know, for me, when I was working with my pro, one of the things we try to do, you know, your swing path is not always going to be exactly, you know, repeatable, but you want to try to get it within a repeatable range. So for me, if I want to hit a draw, that means my swing path needs to be a little bit in to out relative to the club face. And club face needs to be a little closed relative to that path. So I want to keep my path somewhere between +2 to +6 degrees, and I may live anywhere in between there. You know, +4 is a good sweet spot, but that means that if I'm only +2, I'm going to hit it pretty straight. If I'm up to +6, I'm going to overdraw it a little bit. But if I'm hitting a 7-iron into a green, both of those shots will probably end up on the green. One will be on the right edge, one will be on the left edge. And either which way, I'm on the green, and I've mission accomplished. But the main idea here is to develop a repeatable pattern. Maybe for you that's a fade, maybe for you it's a straight ball, but I'm not a guy that is able to play scratch golf creatively. You know, Tiger talks about 9 windows and hitting different shots. I do think it's good to have those skills or to practice those from time to time, but for me, also a big piece of it was grooving one reliable shot pattern. My next step is talking a little bit about course management and strategy. This was also a huge breakthrough for me to lowering my scores, and I really think anyone can improve from this. Now, I kind of subscribe to the decade Scott Fawcett mindset, which kind of builds upon some of my previous points. I know he's also a believer in having one shot shape. But basically the idea is this: even if you have a PGA Tour level golfer and you have them take a 7-iron, go out on the range and hit 100 golf balls, it's going to be a shotgun pattern. It's not going to be a sniper rifle. Even the best golfers in the world don't hit their 7-iron exactly the same every shot. It has a dispersion spread, and it's going to produce some kind of dispersion circle. And so when you're aiming, you're trying to aim the circle. Almost think about it like you're dropping a bomb on an area and you want it to hit the right area. You know, because sometimes you're going to have shots you will pull a little, sometimes you push it a little, sometimes it goes a little higher, a little low. There's going to be a natural dispersion over the course of 100 7-iron shots. So you want to play it such that all of those shots are viable and could potentially be good and help you get pars. Another podcast I really like to listen to is Sweet Spot from Adam Young and John Sherman. I think those guys have really, really good points that they talk about kind of all along the similar line. And basically the end goal for me is to make a lot of very easy pars. Scratch golf is actually a little bit boring, and ultimately, you know, if you think of the way you finish most holes with some kind of tap-in. It's fairly rare that you'll make a lengthier putt or you'll hole out or something. That happens rarely. Most of the time you finish with a tap-in. Well, in order to be scratch, you want most of those tap-ins to be for par. Well, to back up, the easiest way to do that is to have a putt from somewhere on the green. The difference between putting versus chipping and pitching it out of the sand is kind of a lot. Even good professional golfers will only get up and down out of the sand like 50 or 60% of the time, but they will two-putt from anywhere on the green like 95% of the time. And so that's a huge goal. So getting green irregulation is the absolute king statistic, in my opinion, to get scratch. You have to increase the frequency with which you hit greens irregulation. And so going back from there, again, all I ever want to do is hit my little right to left shot. So from the tee, I want to advance the ball as far as I can. Hitting my right to left shot, I'm going to aim up the right and kind of draw the ball back. If it goes into the rough, it's fine. But I don't want to hit it in the water, and you really, really want to avoid penalty strokes. So you may club down at times if you're concerned about hitting in the bunker or out of bounds or in the water. But ultimately you want to advance the ball as far as you can while minimizing penalties. I don't really care if I hit the fairway or the rough. That's not such a big problem. It's really those main objectives. Next, your approach play is extremely critical, and that's kind of why I did so much work with hitting 7-irons in my backyard, because I really need to be increasing the level to which I am hitting greens in regulation. So again, pick my target. My target is almost always going to be a little bit to the right, and I'm thinking about landing, dropping that bomb from up above within my range of dispersion of my, of my chart, of my tendency. So I know if I aim maybe a little bit to the right edge, especially with a middle iron or a longer iron, I'm going to put a little more curve. If it's a shorter iron, I can go a little more straight at it. But I never even care where the pin is located. I always want to know what's the number to the middle, what's the number to the back edge, and I usually pick a number kind of somewhere in between those. I find that my tendency with my Arcos data is I tend to miss greens short, and I would argue that almost all golfers have a tendency to miss most of their greens short. And if you think about it, when you hit it really good, compared to your number, it's not going to go that much further, maybe 5 yards when you really flush it. But if you mishit it, it's not uncommon that you might drop 10 or 15 yards. So that's why I would favor a number a little bit more towards the middle or to the back of the green, regardless of where the pin is located. So with those two objectives, I've got my line, playing my ball flight, I've got my club a little bit further back, and that's going to help me hit the green as much as possible. All right, so the next point of my strategy builds on the previous. If you're going to be hitting a lot of greens regulation, you also need to improve your lag putting. I found that lag putting is a really nice way to actually improve your scoring. Anyone can become good at lag putting. You don't need any crazy skills or talents or giftings or strength or flexibility. Anyone can learn how to control the speed of their putts. I also found that this is really important because if you're going to be putting all this time and effort to hitting lots of green regulation, it probably means that your approach distance to the hole is going to increase. Meaning if you are hitting the green a lot, you're going to have 20 to 40 foot putts a lot. And so decreasing your 3-putt percentage is another huge way to shave strokes off your handicap. So doing lots of drills to improve your lag putting was really, really helpful and important for me to improve. The next layer builds upon that. If you're going to be doing a lot of lag putting, you also need to basically increase your tap-in range. So for a lot of people, like a 2-foot putt is a very easy tap-in. But if you can do some drills to increase it to 3 or even 4, even 5 feet, where you're making 80 or 90% of 4 or 5 footers, that's a huge asset and skill to develop. I know Phil talks about this around the world circle putting drill where he'd put balls around the hole at 3 feet and just go around the hole, and he'd try to make 100 in a row. That drill was really, really crucial for me, and I found it just helps to anchor my putting stroke. I can focus a lot on start line and really hone a good putting stroke through those 3, 4, 5 foot putts. And it also is a really nice game to play if you've got 15 minutes. Say, all right, I'm going to do 4 footers and I want to try to make 25 in a row. And it's a really excellent, it's got competition, it's got external focus, it's got all the things that you want to make it a nice drill for improvement. Now, short game is also important. I don't want to de-emphasize that. You still need to, basically if you want to get to scratch, you need to improve all aspects of your game. But chipping and pitching and sand shots are definitely important and worth prioritizing next. Now, I would say, in my opinion, long game is probably the most important. There's some strokes gain evidence to show that like 2/3 of your strokes gain improvement will come in your long game. I kind of found that to be true myself by improving my ball striking and increasing my greens and reg percentage. That was the stat that most closely correlated with my drop in handicap. But you also need to develop skills with short game. You need to avoid ever 2 chipping or hitting 2 shots in the bunker. So you always need to be at least able to get it on the green. And then if you can get your up and down percentage to 50, 60, 70%, especially with some of those more simpler ones, that's also a huge asset. So even if you're not hitting all the greens in reg, if you can still get up and down every once in a while, that will really help to minimize those big numbers. Eliminating 2 chipping is huge. So some of those other steps are really nice at this point to help drop those scores. I also want to touch a little bit on equipment. Now, I really like golf equipment. I like tinkering with stuff. But I do think equipment plays a meaningful role. If you have 20, 25-year-old clubs that are poorly fitted or optimized, there definitely are some strokes gained that you will achieve just by getting a 1 to 3-year-old driver that has better launch conditions. I know I read a study that argued that another 10 yards in distance leads to, statistically speaking, an increase of a half shot per 18 holes. Now, maybe it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're trying to get to scratch, every little bit counts. And I would say, in my opinion, especially with the longer end of the bag, having a well-fitted driver is really, really critical. With short game and wedge shots, if you have wedges that are 20 years old and don't have any grooves, it's going to be hard for you to get consistent, crisp wedge shots. So I do think equipment is important. I also found that for me, I'm playing 5 hybrids. So I have a hybrid from a 3 hybrid at 18 degrees all the way up to a 7 hybrid at 31 degrees. Now it's a little bit insane, but I found basically that hybrids work really well for me, and I hit more greens. I hit them straight, I hit them high, I hit them straight. They land well on the green and they stop. So I curve it less than an iron, and I'm hitting more greens in reg. And so swallowed my pride a little bit, and I've got this crazy 6 and 7 hybrid in the bag, but it flat out works for me. And so I'm willing to do whatever it takes with my equipment to maximize my scoring percentage. My next encouragement is to start playing a little bit more competitively, joining your local league, starting playing in tournaments. And with my local tournament, one of my goals was to make the cut. We play 18 holes and then have a cut and then a final 9. So setting some of those competitive goals are really helpful because it gives you something to work towards. It gives you an objective to work towards. It also can be very revealing. I'll tell you a quick story. I played a tournament and teed off on the first hole. There was about 20 or 30 scratch golfers behind me watching, and I stone cold topped my drive into the weeds and lost the ball. It was humiliating, but it was a really good motivating experience to keep practicing, to keep pushing. And the other side of the coin was nobody really cared. Even though I hit this horrible, humiliating shot, I was the only one that was humiliated. Everyone went on to their own round and was fine. So, it was just a great experience. And then when you come back to a league round or just a normal fun round, the pressure and the intensity of those is so much lower, and it just feels like it's so much easier to go out and play golf for fun. Then the last thing I would just say is you've got to be able to change your mindset. A big part of becoming a scratch golfer is changing the way that you think and the way that you think to yourself. So for example, your ability to stay even keel and to weather some bad holes. If you birdie or bogey 3 of the first 4 holes and you're 3 over through 4 and you want to try to shoot even par, right? That's pretty obnoxious. But you've got to learn how to develop some mental toughness and to weather some of those storms and just keep going. The journey is going to be long. This took me 4 years, and there were a lot of ups and downs. There were times where I was pretty deeply discouraged and never thought I would get there. But you've got to develop some mental toughness to achieve it. I'd also say there's a little bit of a change in your thought process and your thinking that needs to occur in terms of your self-talk. You need to develop a quiet inner confidence that you are, in fact, a scratch golfer, and that you deserve and you belong to be there because you put in the time and the work. And really, it's just a matter of time until that number matches with what you really are inside. And I think that's helpful because it gives you a little bit of resolve. It gives you a little bit of quiet, I can do this. I know sometimes when you have a scoring barrier, if you've never broken 80 before, but you've shot 81 or 82 and you're nervous about that. Well, when you get up to 18th hole, if you truly believe that you are a golfer that breaks 80 and you've got a quiet confidence about yourself, it really helps to dispel those jitters of, in thinking too much about that. And I'd even say learning how to develop some skills to stay in the moment and to not even focus on your external score and just hold that quiet inner confidence that it doesn't matter what I shoot. It doesn't matter, even if I don't break 80 on this round, it doesn't matter. You're not tied, you're not married to your outcome. You're focusing on the process. You're focusing on your pre-shot routine, on hitting the right club, getting a good swing feel, and then executing, right? Focusing the minutia of the process and holding that quiet inner confidence will see you through and you'll break those barriers. And then before you know it, you're at a place where you can kind of play ho-hum golf and shoot even par. And even you can shoot maybe 1 or 2 under. And in the past, I would have been ecstatic to shoot 2 under par. But, in the last month, I've probably done it 4, 5, 6 times on 9 holes. So with, that quiet inner confidence, you have some expectation that this is something I can and will do. And you know what, you're also going to have rounds where you still shoot 6 over par or something, and you just got to weather that storm as well. So that quiet inner confidence can give you a baseline to see you through. Those are my tips. I hope that this video was helpful to you. I hope it's encouraging to you and motivating to you to get there. If I can do it, I believe that you can do it. I'm not a special person, but I think, implement some changes and some game plan strategies here, and I stuck with it over the course of 4 years, and I achieved that goal. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to keep posting. I've got some new goals that I'm probably going to set that I'd like to track on the channel, so if you're curious to follow along, let me know. But love to hear your thoughts and comments down below. If you're a scratch golfer, what do you agree or disagree with? This is what worked for me. I'm sure there are other things that would work well differently for other people. So let me know your thoughts down below. See you again soon. Thanks. Bye.